My blade is already drawn before my mind finishes waking. That is how it works for us. Training runs deeper than thought. I crouch on a wet rooftop under a sky full of strange stars that do not belong to my homeworld, and below me stands a lone soldier named Daniel Cross, rifle slung over his shoulder, breath fogging in the cold night air. My orders are simple. End him before sunrise. He is the first name on a list of names that the Kalanor Empire wants erased from existence, and I am Zeth Rakar, a silent blade, the deadliest kind of hunter my people have ever made. I have never failed a mission. I have never once questioned an order. Tonight should be no different. I have studied this species for 3 full cycles before they let me set foot on this planet. I read reports on their wars, their weapons, their endless history of conflict between their own kind. The Empire's analysts called humans reckless, emotional, dangerous in numbers but weak alone. They said humanity was rising too fast, gaining allies among the smaller star nations too quickly, and that if we did not slow them down now, in 10 cycles they would be a problem no fleet could solve. So the Council did what the Council always does when a problem grows too large for words. They sent us instead. I do not ask questions, I follow the list. Daniel Cross is a communications officer stationed at a quiet outpost near a coastline, nothing important by military rank, but his file says he trained 3 other officers who now hold command positions the Empire wants gone. Remove the root, and the tree falls slower. That is the logic. I believe it because I have always believed it. I watch him walk his patrol line, boots crunching over gravel, rifle steady, eyes scanning a horizon he cannot possibly know is being studied by something far above his understanding. He looks tired. His shoulders sag the way a person's shoulders sag after a long shift with no rest in sight. I have seen soldiers like this on a dozen planets. Exhausted, replaceable, forgettable. Then he stops walking. He crouches near a broken fence post where a thin, shivering animal has pressed itself into the shadows, some small 4-legged creature native to this world, ribs visible under matted fur. He does not report it. He does not ignore it either. He opens a pouch on his belt, breaks off a piece of dried food meant for his own ration, and sets it down slowly so he does not frighten the creature away. He waits, patient, until it creeps forward and eats. Only then does he continue his patrol, smiling faintly to himself like he has just won something small and private. I tell myself this changes nothing. A soldier feeding a stray animal is not a variable in my mission parameters. I raise my weapon again, adjusting my angle for a clean strike that will end things quickly and without unnecessary suffering, because even among silent blades there is a code, a strange kind of mercy in how we end a life if we must end it at all. Then his comm device chimes. He answers it immediately, voice dropping into something softer than the tone he used with his fellow soldiers minutes ago. A child's voice comes through the static, calling him by a name that is not his rank or his title, just a small, simple word that means everything to whoever says it. His daughter. She is asking him to finish a story he started the night before, something about a brave explorer lost in a forest of glowing trees. He sits down right there on the cold ground, leaning against the fence post, and begins to speak, weaving details, sound effects, silly voices for different characters, laughing softly when she laughs. I do not move. I have killed generals mid-sentence. I have ended the lives of scientists while they worked, nobles while they slept, soldiers while they stood guard, exactly like this one stands guard. None of them made me hesitate. But something about watching this man give away his own rest, his own food, his own voice, to creatures that cannot repay him in any currency the Empire would recognize, roots itself somewhere inside me that I did not know existed until this very moment. The story ends. The child says something that makes him laugh, and he tells her he loves her before the connection cuts out. He sits alone in the dark for a moment longer, staring up at the same strange sky I am hiding beneath, and for one strange breath it feels as if he is looking directly at me, though I know that is not possible. Then he stands, brushes off his uniform, and resumes his patrol as if nothing happened at all. I lower my weapon. I tell myself it is strategy. Better to gather more information before committing to an irreversible action. Better to understand the full picture before I remove a single piece from it. This is the story I tell myself as I retreat from the rooftop into the tall grass beyond the outpost fence, moving in complete silence the way my training demands, my mind anything but silent. My ship waits 3 kilometers away, cloaked beneath a hillside, invisible to every scanner this world possesses. I return to it without completing my assignment for the first time in my entire career. I sit in the pilot's chamber and stare at the file open on my display, Daniel Cross's photograph looking back at me, unaware how close he came to never seeing his daughter again, unaware of how close he still might be. I tell the ship's log that the target was unreachable due to unexpected security measures. It is a lie. Silent blades are not supposed to lie in their reports. It is the second rule I have broken tonight, and the night is not yet finished with me. I open the files on the other names for this world: scientists, diplomats, officers of higher rank than Daniel Cross, people whose absence would matter more to the war machine grinding forward behind me. I tell myself the next target will be different, that Daniel Cross was simply an unfortunate first assignment, a soft target that triggered something irrelevant in my judgment. But as I scroll through image after image, I notice something the Empire's analysts never mentioned in a single report. Every human file contains not just military records or scientific achievements, but small personal details buried in the margins. A mother's illness, a brother lost in an accident, a promise made to a friend before deployment. The Empire collected this information only to understand human behavior patterns for combat prediction, nothing more. But reading it now, after what I just witnessed, it looks like something else entirely. It looks like a species that carries the weight of everyone they love wherever they go, even into war, even into danger, even standing guard alone at night under stars that do not belong to them. I close the file. Outside my viewport, the planet turns slowly beneath a thin layer of clouds, oceans catching starlight, cities glowing faintly along the coastlines like scattered embers. Somewhere down there, Daniel Cross is finishing his patrol and heading toward a warm bunk, thinking about tomorrow's shift, maybe thinking about his daughter's bedtime story, completely unaware that the sky above him just spared his life for reasons even I cannot fully explain. I have 3 cycles remaining before I must report back to the Empire's oversight vessel stationed beyond this system's outer boundary. 3 cycles to complete a list of names, or to explain why I have not. I know what happens to silent blades who fail their contracts without cause. I know the punishment. I have delivered that punishment myself to others in the past, on orders from superiors who never once doubted their own righteousness. And yet I sit in my cloaked ship, staring at a picture of a tired soldier feeding a hungry animal, and I feel something that no amount of training prepared me for. Not fear of failure, not doubt in my skill, something closer to a question, one I have never been permitted to ask in my entire life as a weapon of the Empire. What if the wrong side sent me here? I do not sleep that night, if sleep is even the right word for what my body needs after a mission. Instead, I run the next name on my list, through my ship's display, a scientist working at a research facility further inland, someone whose work the Empire fears could accelerate human defensive technology by years if left unchecked. Her file shows a woman named Emma Hart, 32 years old, 3 published breakthroughs in energy shielding, unmarried, no children, described by her colleagues as brilliant, stubborn, and fiercely loyal to the people she works alongside. I decide, against every instinct my training has carved into me, that I will watch her before I act. Just as I watch Daniel Cross, I tell myself this is proper procedure, gathering additional intelligence before an irreversible strike. I tell myself this again and again as I plot a course toward the research facility, though somewhere beneath the surface of my thoughts, a quieter voice already suspects the truth. I am not gathering intelligence. I am looking for a reason to spare her too. The research facility sits at the edge of a forest, surrounded by fences that would stop nothing capable of doing what I do. I arrive under cover of a storm rolling in from the coast, thunder masking the faint sound of my landing, rain washing away any trace of my presence before local sensors could register it. I move through the tree line with practiced silence, every step calculated, every breath controlled, until I reach a maintenance shaft that leads directly beneath the main laboratory. Inside, the building hums with machines I do not fully understand, strange devices built by a species the Empire insists is still primitive compared to our own technology, yet somehow already close to matching shielding systems that took my people generations to perfect. I climb upward through the shaft until I reach a ventilation grate overlooking the central lab, and there she is, Emma Hart, exactly as her file described, though no file could have captured the intensity in her eyes as she works. She is arguing with two colleagues over a display filled with equations I recognize only in fragments. Her voice is sharp, confident, unwilling to back down even when the two men across from her raise their voices in frustration. I expect her to lose the argument through sheer force of numbers against her, 2 against 1, but instead she silences them with a single demonstration, adjusting a variable on the display that makes the entire projected shield model stabilize instantly. The two men fall quiet. One of them, older, with gray beginning to show at his temples, simply nods and says she was right again, like this has happened many times before. I watch her work for nearly 2 hours, waiting for an opening, though I tell myself the delay is tactical patience rather than hesitation. During that time, an alarm sounds through the facility, sharp and sudden, followed by a flash of light from an adjoining chamber and a wave of heat that even I can feel through the ventilation grate. Something has gone wrong with an experiment in the room beside the main lab. Emma does not run away from the sound like the others do. She runs toward it. I follow her through the vents, adjusting my path along the ceiling structure until I have a clear view into the smaller chamber, now filled with smoke and flickering emergency lights. 2 technicians lie on the ground, overcome by fumes, unable to reach the exit on their own. Emma drops to her knees beside the nearest one, pulling him by his arms toward the door despite the smoke burning her own throat, coughing violently as she drags him clear. She goes back for the second technician without hesitation, without waiting for help, without a single thought for her own safety as far as I can tell from the way she moves. By the time facility security arrives with proper equipment, she has already pulled both technicians into the hallway, collapsing against the wall herself, chest heaving, face streaked with soot. Someone brings her water. She refuses to drink it until she confirms both technicians are breathing steadily first. I remain hidden above, watching a woman who could have simply stepped back and let trained responders handle the emergency, choose instead to risk her own safety for 2 people who work beside her every day. This is not calculated behavior designed to protect valuable assets for the Empire's threat assessments. This is something else, something that keeps appearing every time I watch these creatures long enough to see past their uniforms and their weapons. I retreat from the facility that night without completing my second assignment, just as I failed to complete my first. Back aboard my ship, I sit in silence for a long while, turning over everything I have witnessed since arriving on this world. A soldier who feeds a hungry animal and tells his daughter bedtime stories between patrols. A scientist who runs toward danger instead of away from it, risking everything for people who are not even her responsibility to save. The Empire's reports called these individuals dangerous. They called them threats requiring elimination. They never once mentioned any of this. I open a secure channel, one used only between silent blades operating in the same sector, hoping to find some clarity from someone who shares my training, my discipline, my understanding of what our work requires. The channel connects almost immediately, and the voice that answers belongs to another blade named Nathan Price, assigned to a different continent on this same planet, tasked with a similar list of names. His voice sounds different than I remember from our academy days together, quieter, uncertain. I ask him plainly whether he has completed any of his assignments yet. There is a long pause before he answers, and when he finally speaks, his words land heavier than I expected. He tells me about a target he was sent to eliminate, a human engineer working on defensive fortifications along a mountain border. He followed proper procedure, studied the target for the required observation period, prepared for a clean and swift completion of his contract. Then, during his final approach, he discovered the engineer's home unexpectedly occupied by a young child, no more than 7 or 8 years by human years, drawing pictures at a kitchen table while waiting for a parent to return from work. Nathan tells me the child was drawing a picture of her father, the very man on his target list, depicted with wide cartoonish arms wrapped around a smaller figure meant to represent her, both of them standing beneath a bright yellow sun with the words "My Hero" written across the top in uneven handwriting. He says he could not bring himself to complete the mission after seeing that drawing. He says he sat outside that house for 6 hours, unable to move forward, unable to report failure, simply frozen between two impossible choices. In the end, he returned to his ship without harming anyone, filed a false report just as I did, and has not slept properly since. I ask him what he intends to do now that both of us have failed our first assignments without explanation the Empire will accept. He tells me he already knows what will happen if the Council discovers the truth. Silent blades who refuse contracts without acceptable justification are considered compromised, unreliable, dangerous to the Empire's operational security. The punishment for compromised blades is not simple dismissal. It is far more permanent than that. Neither of us speaks for a long moment after he says this. Then he asks me a question I did not expect. He asks whether I believe humanity deserves what the Empire has planned for them. I do not answer immediately, because I genuinely do not know how to answer. Everything my training has taught me says humans are exactly the threat the Empire claims them to be. But everything I have personally witnessed since arriving here says something different, something that contradicts every briefing, every strategic analysis, every justification handed down from commanders who have never once set foot on this world themselves. I tell Nathan what I witnessed: the soldier and the animal, the scientist running into smoke and fire for people who are not even family to her. He listens without interrupting, and when I finish, he tells me something that changes the direction of everything that follows. He says he is not the only blade experiencing this. Word has begun spreading quietly through certain channels, other assassins assigned to this same world reporting similar hesitations, similar failures, similar unexplainable moments where a target's humanity became impossible to ignore. Some blades pushed through their doubts and completed their contracts anyway, but an unusual number did not, and among those who did not, several have simply stopped responding to any communication at all. This last detail unsettles me more than anything else he says. Silent blades do not simply disappear. We are trained from childhood to endure isolation, danger, uncertainty, without losing contact with our command structure. For multiple blades to vanish without any trace suggests something happened to them during their assignments here, something the Empire's briefings never prepared any of us to face. I ask Nathan if he knows what happened to the missing blades. He tells me the last transmission anyone received came from a blade named Laura Simmons, assigned to eliminate a diplomat working to establish trade agreements between several human nations and neighboring alien territories that had not yet allied with the Kalanor Empire. Her final message was short, recorded just before her communications went permanently silent. Nathan repeats her words to me exactly as he remembers them. She said she found her target's home. She said the target's family showed her kindness before she had even revealed her true purpose there, mistaking her for a stranded traveler and offering shelter from a storm without asking anything in return. She said she could not complete her mission after that, and she did not know what she would do next, only that she refused to become the reason that family's kindness was repaid with harm. After that message, nothing more was heard from her. I sit with this information long after my conversation with Nathan ends, staring out at the storm still raging across the coastline below, thunder rolling over dark water, and I understand with growing certainty that something larger than my own individual hesitation is happening across this entire world. The Empire sent its most skilled and disciplined killers to eliminate a handful of names on a list, expecting efficient and silent completion of every contract. Instead, one by one, their weapons are choosing not to fire. I think about my own list, Still incomplete, still waiting for a decision I have been avoiding making directly. I think about Daniel Cross returning to his bunk after finishing a story for his daughter. I think about Emma Hart refusing water until she confirmed two strangers were safe. I think about a child's drawing with the words "My Hero" written across it in uneven handwriting, and a family offering shelter to a stranger during a storm without asking for anything in return. I realize I am no longer simply delaying my mission out of tactical caution. I have already made my decision, somewhere between watching a soldier share his food with a hungry animal and hearing about a diplomat's family sheltering the very assassin sent to end his life. I will not complete this contract. But making that decision privately, alone in my cloaked ship above a storm-covered coastline, is far easier than what comes next, because somewhere beyond this system's outer boundary, the Empire's oversight vessel is waiting for my report, and Nathan's report, and every other Blade's report, expecting a growing list of confirmed eliminations. When that list does not arrive as expected, the Empire will not simply accept silence as an answer. They will send someone to find out why, and I have a terrible suspicion that whoever they send next will not hesitate the way Nathan and I did, the way Laura Simmons apparently did before her transmission went dark forever. The Empire has other assets beyond silent blades, colder ones built specifically to handle failures, like the one unfolding across this world right now. I open a new channel, broader this time, reaching toward every frequency silent blades are trained to monitor within this sector. I do not know exactly how many of us are scattered across this planet's surface at this moment, watching targets, hesitating over contracts, wrestling with the same impossible questions Nathan and I have already answered for ourselves. But I intend to find out, because if an entire generation of the Empire's most trusted killers is beginning to question the righteousness of this mission, then perhaps the mission itself was never righteous to begin with. Perhaps we were never sent here to protect the Empire from a threat. Perhaps we were sent here to silence a species the Empire feared for reasons that had nothing to do with danger at all. The broad channel stays open for nearly a full day before the first response comes through. A short burst of static, followed by a voice I do not recognize, careful and quiet, asking who is transmitting on a frequency reserved for command-level communication only. I identify myself using my registration number rather than my name, a habit drilled into every silent blade since childhood, and I ask a single question in return. Has this blade completed their assigned contract? Silence follows for several long seconds. Then the voice admits, hesitantly, that they have not. Over the next several hours, more voices answer the same question the same way. A blade stationed near a mountain range assigned to eliminate a border engineer, unable to complete the mission after watching the man rebuild a collapsed shelter for families displaced by flooding, working through exhaustion until his hands bled rather than abandon strangers to the cold. A blade assigned to a coastal city, sent to remove a naval officer, unable to act after witnessing the officer personally carry an elderly civilian through rising floodwaters during a storm, refusing rescue for himself, until every person on his list of responsibility was accounted for first. Blade after blade, contract after contract, the same pattern repeating itself across an entire planet, as if humanity itself had somehow prepared a defense none of us anticipated, not through weapons or shields, but through the simple, undeniable evidence of who they truly are, when no one official is watching. By the time the sun rises over my hidden position along the coastline, I have counted 11 blades who share my hesitation, 11 of us who quietly refuse to finish contracts that should have been simple by every measure of our training. Nathan believes there are more we have not yet reached, scattered across regions where communication delays or damaged equipment prevent immediate contact. 11 confirmed, possibly dozens more unconfirmed, out of an original deployment that numbered close to 40 across this single world. I know what this means before anyone says it aloud. The Empire expected efficient, silent completion. Instead, more than a quarter of its most disciplined killers have simply stopped functioning as intended. This is not an isolated failure. This is the beginning of something the Council has never faced before in the long history of the Silent Blade Order. The response from the Empire arrives faster than I expected. A single ship descends through the clouds above my hidden position 2 days after my last transmission, sleek and dark, marked with the insignia of the Oversight Division rather than the standard fleet. This is not a combat vessel. It is a retrieval craft, the kind used to collect blades for direct questioning when standard reporting channels fail to satisfy command. I do not attempt to flee. Running from oversight only confirms guilt and invites a harsher response than cooperation ever would. I am escorted aboard by 2 enforcers wearing full armor plating, their faces hidden behind reflective visors, neither of them speaking a single word to me during the entire boarding process. The retrieval craft ascends rapidly, clearing the planet's atmosphere within minutes, docking with a much larger vessel waiting in orbit beyond the range of any human detection system currently in existence. This is the Empire's oversight ship for this entire sector, a floating fortress of command and control that has silently watched over our operation since the very first blade touched down on human soil. I am brought before the council chamber without delay, a circular room lined with seats occupied by senior officials of the Silent Blade Order, each of them regarding me with an expression I have never seen directed at myself before: suspicion, disappointment, in some cases, something closer to fear, though I cannot yet understand what a council of hardened commanders would have to fear from a single hesitant assassin. The presiding official, an older blade named Director Halvorn, who trained an entire generation of us, including myself, addresses me directly without preamble. He asks why my contract remains incomplete, despite sufficient time and opportunity to act. He asks why 11 other blades under his command report the same failure within the same operational window. He asks finally whether I understand the consequences awaiting any silent blade found guilty of deliberate insubordination against a direct order from the Empire. I tell him the truth, because lying to Director Halvorn has never once worked for anyone who tried it, and because some part of me has grown tired of carrying a decision alone that deserves to be spoken aloud. I describe Daniel Cross feeding a starving animal despite his own limited rations. I describe Emma Hart running toward danger rather than away from it, refusing comfort until she confirmed the safety of others. I describe everything Nathan told me about the engineer and his daughter's drawing, everything Laura Simmons reported before her communications went silent forever. I tell the council that every report I have gathered, from every hesitant blade across this world, describes the same pattern repeating itself in different forms. Humans protect each other, sacrifice for each other, extend kindness to strangers without expectation of reward, and they do this consistently, in moments of crisis, in moments where no one is watching, in moments where self-interest would be the easier and more logical choice. I tell the council that if the Empire proceeds with its plan to eliminate humanity's leadership and cripple their rising influence, it will not simply be removing a strategic threat. It will be attacking a species whose deepest instinct is to protect the people they love without hesitation or limit. I warn them as clearly as I can manage that a species built this way does not simply retreat or surrender when threatened. It responds with everything it has, and it does not stop until every reason for stopping has been permanently removed from the equation. The council listens to my entire account in complete silence. Then Director Halvorn informs me, in a tone carrying no warmth whatsoever, that my analysis, however detailed, does not override a direct order from the Empire's highest command. He tells me the decision to target human leadership was made based on projections showing humanity's rate of technological and military growth outpacing every neighboring civilization within 20 cycles. He tells me the Empire has faced rising species before, and every single time, delay in decisive action led to far greater conflict later. Better a small, controlled operation now, he says, than an uncontrollable war later. I ask him what happens to species that refuse to simply accept controlled operations designed to limit their growth. He does not answer that question directly. Instead, he informs me that my contract will be reassigned to another blade, one without my apparent complications, and that I, along with the other 10 hesitant blades, will remain in custody aboard the oversight vessel pending further review of our conduct. The word review carries a weight I understand clearly, having witnessed what happens to blades found guilty of compromising Empire operations in the past. Review rarely ends in simple reinstatement. I am escorted to a holding chamber deep within the oversight vessel, where I find Nathan already waiting, along with several other blades I recognize from our brief communications, all of us sharing the same expression of quiet, resigned defiance. None of us speak much during those first hours, each of us processing the reality that our careers, and possibly our lives, now hang entirely on decisions being made in rooms we no longer have access to. Then something happens that none of us expected. A new blade arrives in our holding chamber, roughly 6 hours after my own arrival, escorted by the same silent enforcers who brought me here. This blade introduces herself as Laura Simmons, the very assassin whose final transmission Nathan described to me before, the one everyone assumed had vanished permanently somewhere on human soil. She had not vanished at all. She had been captured, just as we were, after continuing to refuse her assigned contract for nearly a full cycle following her last transmission. She tells us the family who sheltered her during that storm never knew her true identity or purpose, and she could not bring herself to repay their unknowing kindness with harm to anyone connected to them. When Empire retrieval teams finally located her, she surrendered without resistance, choosing capture over completing a mission she had already decided against. Her presence changes something within our small group of detained blades. If Laura Simmons is here, held alongside the rest of us rather than eliminated outright for her prolonged failure, then perhaps the Empire is more uncertain about how to handle this growing pattern of refusal than Director Halvorn's confident tone suggested. Perhaps they fear what might happen if they simply eliminate every hesitant blade rather than understand why so many of us reach the same conclusion independently. Over the following days, more blades arrive in the holding chamber, brought in from across the planet's surface, each with a similar story. By the end of the first week, our number has grown to nearly 20, roughly half of the original deployment sent to eliminate human leadership. 20 of the Empire's most skilled and disciplined assassins, gathered together in a single holding chamber, united not by rebellion in the traditional sense, but by an unshakable, independently reached conviction that our mission was built on a foundation the Empire itself never properly examined. During this time, reports begin filtering into the oversight vessel from the blades who did complete their assignments, or attempted to. Some contracts succeeded, and the news of those completions weighs heavily on all of us held in the chamber, knowing that somewhere below, families like Daniel Cross's, communities like the one surrounding Emma Hart's research facility, are grieving losses inflicted by our own order. But an unusual number of the remaining active blades report unexpected complications. Human security forces, previously dismissed by Empire analysis as insufficient to detect our operatives, have somehow adapted with startling speed. Contracts that should have taken hours are taking days. Blades who avoided capture by us are instead being intercepted by human forces who seem to understand exactly how to counter our methods, as if humanity had learned something from every failed attempt against them and adjusted accordingly within a matter of days, rather than the cycles such adaptation should require. I ask Laura Simmons, during one of our long, quiet conversations in the holding chamber, how she thinks humanity managed to adapt so quickly against threats they should have no way of detecting at all. She offers a theory that unsettles me more than any council warning could. She believes some of the blades who completed their contracts left evidence behind, deliberately or otherwise, that alerted human authorities to a coordinated threat far larger than any single attack could explain. She believes humanity, upon realizing an organized, unseen enemy was targeting their leadership simultaneously across multiple regions, did exactly what every report I gathered suggested they would do. They came together, faster and more decisively than any fractured species should be capable of, setting aside whatever divisions existed among their own nations in favor of a unified response against a shared threat. If this is true, then the Empire's own mission has accomplished the opposite of its intended purpose. Rather than crippling humanity's rising influence through quiet, controlled elimination of key figures, the operation has instead revealed humanity's capacity for rapid, coordinated unity when facing genuine existential danger. The very trait the Empire feared most, humanity's ability to grow stronger and more connected over time, appears to have been accelerated rather than delayed by our own interference. Director Halvorn visits the holding chamber personally 3 weeks into our detention, a rare occurrence for someone of his rank. He does not address us as a group of failed operatives this time. His tone carries something closer to genuine concern, though he attempts to mask it behind his usual composed authority. He informs us that Empire Command, growing increasingly frustrated with the mounting complications on human soil, has begun discussing an alternative approach to the entire operation, one that would bypass the Silent Blade Order entirely in favor of a more direct and overwhelming method of neutralizing the threat. I ask him what he means by direct and overwhelming. He does not answer immediately, and something in his hesitation tells me more clearly than any words could that whatever the Empire is now considering, it goes far beyond quiet assassination of a handful of names on a list. That night, alone in the holding chamber with 19 other blades who share my growing unease, I think back to everything I witnessed on that planet below. Daniel Cross feeding a hungry animal beneath strange stars. Emma Hart pulling strangers from smoke and fire without a second thought for her own safety. A child's drawing with the words "My Hero" written across it. A family sheltering a stranger during a storm without asking for anything in return. If the Empire proceeds with an overwhelming response against a species capable of all of this, I fear we are no longer simply making a mistake. We are about to demonstrate, in the most devastating way possible, exactly why humanity's capacity for unity and sacrifice should never have been treated as a threat requiring elimination in the first place. Because a species that fights this hard to protect strangers will fight infinitely harder to protect everyone and everything they have ever loved, once that love becomes the very thing under direct attack. The order comes without warning, delivered not through Director Halvorn, but through a general announcement broadcast across every deck of the oversight vessel, informing all personnel that Empire Command has authorized a full military campaign against the human home world, effective immediately. The quiet, controlled elimination of key leadership figures has officially been abandoned in favor of overwhelming force, a decision made, according to the announcement, to eliminate any possibility of continued failure through more subtle means. I stand in the holding chamber alongside 19 other detained blades, listening to this announcement in a silence so complete I can hear my own pulse. Whatever hope I held that reason might prevail over fear within the Empire's command structure disappears entirely in that moment. They are no longer trying to slow humanity's rise through careful, targeted removal of specific threats. They intend to strike the entire planet at once, a blunt and devastating solution to a problem they never fully understood in the first place. Laura Simmons is the first among us to speak after the announcement ends. She says what every one of us is already thinking but afraid to voice aloud. If a handful of assassinations caused humanity to unite and adapt faster than any species should reasonably be capable of, a full-scale military assault will not simply overwhelm them. It will ignite something far beyond anything the Empire's analysts have modeled in their projections. Nathan asks the obvious question: what can 20 detained blades, stripped of our ships and most of our equipment, possibly do to stop a fleet that has already begun its advance toward human space? I do not have an answer immediately, but over the following hours, as reports filter into the oversight vessel detailing the fleet's rapid approach, an idea begins forming among our group, quiet at first, then gaining shape as more of us contribute pieces to it. We may not have the ability to stop a fleet, but we know things about humanity that the Empire's war planners never bothered to learn. We know how they think, we know what drives them, and more importantly, several of us still maintain contacts on the planet's surface, humans who unknowingly sheltered us, humans who never learned our true purpose, humans who might listen if given the chance to hear a warning delivered honestly. Our opportunity comes during the chaos following the fleet's departure from the oversight vessel, when security protocols shift to accommodate the massive logistical demands of a full military campaign. Laura Simmons, using knowledge of internal systems gained during her years of service, manages to disable a section of the vessel's containment field just long enough for our group to reach an unguarded shuttle bay. We do not have weapons. We do not have proper clearance. What we have is desperation, and a shared understanding that remaining detained while our own people commit an unforgivable act against an entire world is no longer something any of us can accept. 8 of us make it to the shuttle before security forces respond. The rest remain behind, creating enough disruption to buy the necessary time, knowing full well what consequences await them for this act of open defiance. I do not know what becomes of them in the following hours, and the not knowing settles into me as a weight I will carry for a long time afterward. Our shuttle descends toward the human homeworld just ahead of the main fleet, small enough and quiet enough to slip past detection systems still calibrated to watch for larger threats. We land in a remote region far from any major population center, abandoning the shuttle immediately and scattering according to a plan formed in whispered fragments during our escape. My destination is the coastal region, where I first observed Daniel Cross feeding a hungry animal beneath a night sky that was never truly mine to watch from above. I reach the outpost just as the first signs of the approaching fleet become visible, even to untrained human observers, strange lights appearing in patterns across the night sky that no natural phenomenon could explain. I find Daniel Cross exactly where I expect him, standing at his post, staring upward with an expression I recognize immediately. Not fear exactly, something closer to grim recognition, as if some part of him always suspected a day like this might eventually come. I approach him without concealment, for the first time since arriving on this world, and I tell him everything: who I am, what I was sent to do, why I never completed my assignment, what is coming and why it is coming, and what I believe will happen once it arrives. He listens without interrupting, and when I finish, he does not react with the anger or violence I half expected. He simply asks one question: why am I telling him this now, after everything? I tell him the truth, because I believe warning him, and through him warning as many people as possible, is the only meaningful action left available to someone who spent cycles being trained to take life rather than protect it. Daniel Cross does something in that moment that I did not anticipate. He thanks me, genuinely, before turning immediately toward his communications equipment to relay everything I told him up through proper channels. Within hours, similar warnings begin surfacing from other locations across the planet, delivered by other members of our small group of escaped blades, each of us choosing to warn the very people we were sent to eliminate, rather than remain silent while an entire fleet descended upon them unprepared. What happens next unfolds faster than anything the Empire's war planners could have predicted. Human nations that maintained careful, sometimes tense relationships for generations abandon those tensions almost entirely within the span of a single day. Military commands that never previously coordinated closely begin sharing information, resources, and defensive strategies with a speed and efficiency that stuns even me, someone who has already witnessed humanity's capacity for rapid unity firsthand. Civilian populations, rather than descending into panic, organize with a discipline that mirrors the very qualities I observed in Daniel Cross and Emma Hart. Ordinary people setting aside personal safety to support strangers, preparing for what everyone now understands is coming. I watch from a hidden position near the coastline as the Empire's fleet arrives in full force, dark shapes descending through the atmosphere in formations designed to project overwhelming, undeniable power. This is meant to be a demonstration of dominance so complete that resistance becomes pointless before a single confrontation even begins. That is how such campaigns are supposed to unfold, based on every previous operation the Empire has conducted against lesser threats throughout its long history of expansion. Humanity does not respond the way the Empire expects. Defensive systems that Empire analysts dismissed as primitive activate with a coordination and precision that catches the approaching fleet completely off guard. Emma Hart's shielding technology, the very innovation I once watched her develop through exhausting hours of dedicated work, proves far more advanced and far more rapidly deployable than any Empire projection anticipated, protecting key population centers from initial strikes that should have devastated them instantly. Military commanders across multiple continents execute coordinated countermeasures with a speed that suggests preparation far exceeding anything reasonable given the short warning window available to them. I realize, watching this unfold from my hidden position, that humanity did not simply prepare defenses in the hours since receiving our warnings. They had already been quietly preparing for this exact possibility for weeks, perhaps longer, ever since the first wave of failed assassination attempts revealed the existence of a hidden threat operating within their borders. Every hesitant blade who failed a contract, every strange disappearance investigated by human security forces, every fragment of evidence left behind by blades who did complete their missions, had been quietly assembled into a growing understanding that something far larger than isolated incidents was unfolding. Humanity had been preparing in silence, exactly as I once accused them of doing when I studied their history and found a species whose violence always seemed inseparable from protection and sacrifice. The battle that follows unfolds across days rather than the swift, decisive hours the Empire's commanders expected. Human forces, fighting with a coordination born from genuine unity rather than mere strategic necessity, begin pushing back against a fleet that arrived expecting overwhelming, effortless dominance. Losses mount on both sides, and I watch with a growing, uncomfortable mixture of vindication and grief as everything I warned the Council about begins unfolding exactly as I described it. Humanity does not fight like an aggressor seeking conquest. They fight like something cornered and desperate to protect everyone and everything they love, and that desperation translates into a ferocity and endurance that the Empire's analysts never accounted for in any of their projections. Reports reach me, gathered through channels other escaped blades maintain across the planet, describing human forces adapting tactics in real time, learning from every encounter, refining their defenses with a speed that mirrors the same rapid unity I witnessed take hold across their nations within a single day of receiving warning. By the 5th day of open conflict, the Empire's fleet, which arrived expecting to demonstrate effortless dominance over a primitive threat, finds itself locked in a prolonged struggle it never anticipated needing to fight. Reinforcements are requested from beyond the system's boundary, but I understand, watching this unfold, that reinforcements will not change the fundamental miscalculation at the heart of this entire campaign. The Empire did not simply underestimate humanity's technology or their military capability. They underestimated something far more dangerous. They underestimated exactly how far a species will go when everyone they love becomes the target of an enemy who never bothered to understand who they were fighting in the first place. I think back to Director Halvorn's warning about species that grow too powerful too quickly, about the danger of delaying decisive action until it becomes too late to control the outcome. Standing here now, watching humanity respond to an unprovoked attack with a unity and ferocity that has already stunned the Empire's finest commanders, I understand with complete certainty that the Council's fear was never truly about humanity's technological growth at all. It was about exactly this, a species capable of transforming grief and threat into unstoppable, coordinated purpose, faster and more completely than any civilization the Empire has ever encountered before. And now, having attacked that very capacity directly, rather than allowing it to develop naturally over time, the Empire has guaranteed the one outcome every report I gathered warned them about from the very beginning. The Empire's fleet withdraws from orbit on the 11th day of open conflict, retreating in a formation that bears no resemblance to the confident arrival that began this entire campaign. I watch the retreat unfold from a hillside overlooking the coastline, standing beside Daniel Cross himself, who insisted on witnessing this moment firsthand, despite the risks still present across the region. Neither of us speaks for a long while, as the last of the dark shapes disappears beyond the atmosphere, leaving behind a sky finally clear of anything that does not belong there. I expect relief to follow this moment. Instead, I feel something closer to dread, because I understand better than anyone present exactly what a retreating fleet means within Empire military doctrine. Retreat is never accepted as a final outcome. It is treated as a temporary repositioning before a larger, more determined response. I tell Daniel Cross this directly, and he receives the warning with the same quiet, grim acceptance I noticed in him the very first night I watched him from a rooftop, unaware at the time how close he had come to never seeing another sunrise. Humanity does not wait passively for that larger response to arrive. Within days of the Empire's withdrawal, coordinated human forces, now unified across every major nation in a manner that would have seemed impossible mere weeks earlier, begin organizing a response of their own. I am brought before a council of human military leadership, not as a prisoner this time, but as a witness whose knowledge of Empire operations and decision-making processes proves valuable to commanders trying to understand exactly what they now face. Among those leading this council is a woman named Olivia Grant, a diplomat whose name I recognize immediately from my original list of targets, the very person Laura Simmons was once assigned to eliminate before choosing to protect her instead. Olivia Grant asks me directly whether I believe the Empire will return with greater force, and whether humanity's current defenses will prove sufficient against a larger, better-prepared campaign. I tell her honestly that I do not know the answer with certainty, but that everything I understand about Empire doctrine suggests they will not simply accept this defeat without attempting a decisive response designed to permanently eliminate the threat humanity now represents in their strategic calculations. A commander named Henry Walsh, sitting beside Olivia Grant throughout this meeting, asks a different question. He asks whether humanity should wait for that response, or whether they should take the initiative themselves, striking outward before the Empire has fully recovered from its unexpected defeat. I understand the weight of what he is suggesting immediately. A defensive posture, however successful, still leaves humanity vulnerable to whatever the Empire chooses to attempt next. An offensive posture, carrying the fight beyond their own world's boundary, offers the possibility of ending this conflict permanently rather than enduring repeated waves of escalating aggression. I tell them what I believe to be true, based on everything I have witnessed since arriving on this planet. Humanity does not fight like conquerors, seeking dominance for its own sake, but a defensive war fought entirely on the defender's own soil, absorbing repeated attacks indefinitely, is not a sustainable path either. Sometimes protecting everyone you love requires carrying the danger away from them rather than simply waiting for it to arrive again and again. The decision that follows is not made lightly, and I witness debates within human leadership that stretch across many days, weighing costs and consequences with a seriousness that reflects exactly the qualities I observed in every individual human I studied before this conflict began. In the end, a coordinated campaign is authorized, carrying human forces beyond their own system's boundary for the first time in their history, directed not at conquest, but at reaching the Empire's core command structure before another wave of aggression can be organized against Earth. I joined this campaign as an advisor, working alongside Nathan, Laura Simmons, and the other surviving members of our small group of escaped Blades, providing insight into Empire operations, communication protocols, and command structures that prove invaluable as human forces advance through territory none of them had ever previously encountered. What strikes me most throughout this advance is not humanity's growing military capability, impressive as it becomes with each passing week, but their persistent restraint, even as opportunities for excessive retaliation present themselves repeatedly along the way. Colonies and outposts belonging to the Empire, upon encountering advancing human forces, brace themselves for the kind of overwhelming, indiscriminate destruction the Empire itself attempted against Earth. Instead, human commanders consistently prioritize minimizing harm to civilian populations, offering surrender terms before engaging military targets, and extending exactly the kind of mercy the Empire never once considered extending to them. I watch this pattern repeat itself across multiple engagements, and I understand, more clearly with each occurrence, exactly what separates humanity from the civilization that once dismissed them as a primitive threat, requiring quiet elimination. The advance eventually reaches the outer boundary of Empire-controlled space, close enough that the oversight vessel where I was once held in detention now falls within range of human forces for the first time. Reports reaching us during this final approach describe growing panic within Empire command structures, debates among senior officials about how to respond to a threat that has proven far more capable, far more unified, and far more restrained than any previous projection suggested was possible. Director Halvorn, the very official who once presided over my detention and questioning, sends a direct communication requesting to speak with human leadership personally. I am present when this communication arrives, translating not just his words but the underlying tone and intent behind them, something I understand better than any human present given my years of service within the very structure now seeking to negotiate. Director Halvorn does not offer surrender terms in the way I initially expect. Instead, he requests something far more significant. He asks whether humanity would be willing to extend mercy to the Empire itself, acknowledging openly, for the first time in any communication I have witnessed from Empire leadership, that the entire campaign against Earth was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of the very species they attempted to eliminate. Olivia Grant asks me directly whether I believe this request is genuine, or whether it represents a tactical delay designed to buy time for further preparation. I consider the question carefully before answering, drawing on everything I know about Director Halvorn from my years serving under his command. I tell her that Empire officials rarely request mercy as a genuine gesture rather than a calculated strategy, but that the scale of this defeat and the unprecedented speed of humanity's coordinated response may have genuinely shaken something within the Empire's usual confidence in its own dominance. The negotiations that follow stretch across several tense weeks, conducted through careful, measured communication between human leadership and Empire officials increasingly desperate to avoid further losses. I serve throughout this process as both translator and advisor, watching as humanity approaches a defeated aggressor with a combination of firmness and genuine consideration that I recognize immediately from everything I witnessed in individual humans since my very first night observing Daniel Cross on that quiet coastal outpost. Human negotiators demand accountability for the initial attack, insisting on transparency regarding exactly why Earth was targeted and what specific fears drove the Empire toward such a devastating and ultimately catastrophic decision. But alongside these demands, they also offer something the Empire never once considered extending to them: a path toward genuine peace, rather than permanent subjugation or endless retaliation. I watch Empire ambassadors, including officials I once served alongside during my years as a silent blade, kneel before human commanders during the final negotiation session, formally requesting mercy for a civilization that attempted to erase an entire species based on fear and miscalculation rather than genuine justified threat. Among these ambassadors stands a senior official named Chloe Baker, someone whose confident authority I remember clearly from Empire briefings that once dismissed humanity as primitive and easily controlled. Watching her now, humbled before the very species her own reports once mischaracterized so completely, I feel something I did not expect to feel towards someone who represents everything I have come to reject about my own upbringing within the Empire's rigid, fear-driven doctrine. I feel something close to sympathy, because I understand better than most present exactly how deeply Empire doctrine shapes those raised within its structure, teaching fear of growth and unity in other species as an unquestionable truth rather than a choice made by those in power to maintain their own position. Henry Walsh, standing beside Olivia Grant throughout this final negotiation, ultimately extends the mercy the Empire requested, though not without conditions designed to ensure this conflict never repeats itself. The Empire agrees to withdraw permanently from any further interference in human affairs, to provide full transparency regarding the scope and nature of their original operation, and to establish formal channels of communication that will allow future disputes to be resolved through negotiation rather than assassination or overwhelming force. I remain on Earth following the conclusion of these negotiations, choosing not to return to a civilization that trained me from childhood to view an entire species as nothing more than names on a list to be quietly removed. Daniel Cross, along with several others I encountered throughout this entire experience, helps me establish a life here, one built not around silent elimination of perceived threats, but around the same qualities I once observed from a hidden rooftop that changed everything I believed about my purpose in this galaxy. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think back to that very first night, watching a tired soldier share his limited rations with a starving, frightened creature that could offer him nothing in return. I think about how close I came to completing that contract without hesitation, following orders exactly as I had been trained to do since before I could fully understand what those orders truly meant. I think about how a single moment of unexpected kindness, witnessed by chance rather than design, began unraveling an entire empire's carefully calculated plan to silence a species they feared without ever truly understanding. Humanity was never the threat the empire believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous to a civilization built on fear and control. They were proof that unity, sacrifice, and genuine care for one another could overcome even the most overwhelming, carefully calculated force, not through superior weapons or technology, but through something the Empire never possessed and never fully understood. They were proof that mercy, extended freely rather than earned through submission, remains the one force capable of ending conflicts that fear alone can only ever prolong. And I, once trained to end lives without question, now spend my days grateful beyond measure that a hesitant assassin chose, on one quiet night beneath unfamiliar stars, to lower his weapon instead of completing his mission.